to this virtual discussion about the tensions in the East Mediterranean, Turkey's aggression and EU's response in particular. The speakers we have invited to join us today are our ECPM member and member of the European Parliament, Peter van Dalen, who has often raised fierce criticisms of Turkey and its disregard for respecting human rights, religious freedom of minorities, freedom of press, and so on. Secondly, we are honored to have Dr. Kleanthis Kyriakidis, who is assistant professor and chair of Security and Strategic Studies Department at the American University in the Emirates, and also a retired captain in the Greek Navy, which is relevant for our discussion today. Last but not least, we are immensely grateful to Mr. Abdullah Bozkurt. He's a Turkish correspondent for the Zaman and now the director of Nordic Monitor, where he publishes well-researched critical pieces and editorials on Mr. Erdogan and his regime. Thank you all for being here, especially since speaking out against Turkey is brave. It comes with great risks, as our Mr. Bozkurt experienced last weekend. Would you like to share briefly what happened?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me for the conference. When I just got out of home last week on Thursday, I was attacked by 3 men. It was well organized, targeted, and vicious attack. I sustained some injuries and had to rush to the emergency room. But I'm doing okay. I don't have a direct evidence that this incident relates back to Turkey or to what I have been publishing. But since this was targeted and organized attack, I suspect, it's traced back to some elements within the Turkish government, considering the fact that I have been publishing documentary evidence of what the Erdogan government has been doing, not only in Turkey but outside of Turkey, with the notorious intelligence services. Then I guess that was expected. It was a surprise, of course, when you get the ambush. You don't like that. But I knew someday that might happen, and it happened. Now the Swedish authorities have been looking into the incident, trying to find out the perpetrators. But health-wise, I am okay, and I get back to my work. And I understand the message is the intimidation to convince me to stop writing, stop speaking up and against the Turkish government. And I say I refuse that message, and I will continue to do so as I have done before.
Yes. It's absolutely horrible what happened. You have our support, and yeah, we really hope that the perpetrators will be caught and brought to justice soon. Yeah. Definitely. All right, for our discussion today, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context before we dive into the questions. And specifically about this summer's events, although this whole year Turkey has been in the spotlight, but specifically this summer, one of Turkey's research vessels set out in disputed waters in the East Mediterranean to search for oil and gas reserves that Turkey could claim and explore. Now, this Turkish vessel was accompanied by warships and fighter jets. In response, Greece and Cyprus, which are EU members, and also claim a stake in those waters, have countered with ships and planes of their own. In addition, France quickly came to their side, sending military help. Now, if we zoom out a bit more of the situation, this tinderbox is even more complicated by the fact that Greece and Turkey are both NATO members, lifelong rivals, that Greece and Cyprus, for instance, are EU members, and Turkey has been trying to join the European Union since forever, But conversations have stalled and are actually now suspended. Now, geopolitically, Turkey has angered just about everyone. First, its NATO fellow members, when Turkey decided to buy a Russian air defense system last year. And then it came into direct conflict with the European Union and the US when it invaded northeast Syria. And then when it started getting close to Libya, it made bilateral agreements and sold them weapons despite the embargo set on Libya. And then also got close to Iran. It is by now pretty well documented and public knowledge that Turkey is directly and indirectly supporting various terrorist groups. Very recently, Armenia conflict as well. So if you are by now wondering, how is it that Turkey gets away with so much? Well, in a nutshell, it has the EU prisoner, metaphorically speaking, because Erdogan keeps threatening to break the agreement that he made with the EU regarding the refugees. So every time an MEP like Mr. Van Dalen dares to propose a practical containment measure, or when sanctions are mentioned, he brings this up. It's the same with US or NATO. There is a military base of great strategic importance in Turkey. So the situation is complex and complicated, which is why we invited the speakers today who are experts on this matter and in this area. So I would start with you, Mr. Van Dalen. What do you think of the German mediation? Are they doing enough? Do you think it's the right approach in de-escalating this current conflict? And is there something that you would like to see them do more?
Well, thank you very much. I will concentrate on the European Union, being a member of the European Parliament. Turkey is a NATO member, but as the European Parliament is not dealing with NATO, it's a different organization. I will focus on the issue of the European Union. My party has been against Turkey's admission to the European Union ever since. Since many, many years, we said to the voters and to the public and to leaders of the EU member states, Turkey is not Europe, but also Turkey is a country with a historic, religious, cultural orientation that is different from the European Union. In this viewpoint, we have been quite alone for many years, apart from some radical right parties, but the more middle-oriented political parties and also the socialists and the Greens, they neglected our point of view. However, I am really happy to see that the general opinion on Turkey is now changing. And it has all to do with the aggressive policies of Mr. Erdogan. You already mentioned various examples of his aggression, and as a matter of fact, he is building some sort of an Ottoman Empire, and he, as the highest chief, directing Turkey to a religious political state. And therefore, I have suggested in the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament last month some amendments to stop the yearly amount Turkey gets for what is called pre-accession money. Every year they get about 600 million euros to step by step get them closer to the EU as so-called pre-accession money. And to my, well, let's say surprise, but happy surprise, the Foreign Affairs Committee has almost unanimously supported my amendment. So we will now have this amendment in the budget discussion by the end of this year. And I really hope we will stop also these pre-accession funds, because Turkey should not be an EU member. And of course, especially Germany is dealing now as Council President with the situation. But I really liked the French approach in the Cyprus conflict, whereby Mr. Macron did send some warships to the zones near Cyprus and to show some strength, because I'm afraid that only strength is the word Mr. Erdogan is listening to. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Do you, just to follow up, so would you completely say and be on board with the fact that we should stop the accession talks altogether?
Yes, we should definitely stop the accession talks. They should have never been started, as far as I'm concerned. And what we should do is make some sort of a neighbor policy. We have a neighbor policy with various countries around the EU, and of course we should have some sort of a trade neighbor policy with Turkey, but that's it.
All right, thank you for that. Now let me turn to you, Professor Kyriakidis. As a professor of strategic studies in the Emirates, which, by the way, is the only country that took a more decisive and forceful action by imposing an embargo on Turkish products. How do we bring the EU member states, NATO members together? Because it seems that there are some different takes or different points of view on how to address Turkey and in this latest string of provocations.
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and allow me to start by saying other Gulf countries and Arab countries in general, they have issues with Turkey and they have a very strong stance against Turkey. For example, Saudi Arabia has now a full embargo on the Turkish products, and Saudi Arabia was a very, very strong economic partner of Turkey. Also, I mean, you really don't want to talk with an Egyptian as regards, President Erdogan's policies. So it's not a matter of only Europe feeling, threatened, that under President Erdogan, Turkey has either invaded or participated in different wars in the Arab world, starting from Syria, Iraq, and leading to Libya, of course. Now, I started by saying this in order to differentiate between, the Turkey with Kemal Atatürk vision and nowadays Turkey. They have nothing to do. I mean, they are two words apart. Think of the famous motto, peace at home, peace in the world, of Kemal Atatürk. This has nothing to do with Erdogan. Erdogan is dangerous and has turned Turkey actually to a failed state and a rogue state. And we have to be very, 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 serious about that. And we should not appease President Erdogan. Now we follow in the European Union and in NATO. Of course, NATO Turkey is a full member, but we follow a policy of appeasement. And appeasement does not work. We have seen that since Munich 1938. I mean, really, really does not work. You cannot deal with Turkey, nowadays Turkey, without force, and I don't mean violence, I mean economic sanctions really, as a first step in order to put some pressure in a country that its economy is not in the best situation. Actually, it's really bad right now. The economic situation in Turkey is really bad. So what we need to do as European Union, the first thing is, to not allow Turkey's aggressive stance, do not allow it to guide lead our response. We must be proactive, not reactive. A good answer would be to have, for example, an international coalition, naval presence from different countries. Can be other countries also, not EU. Could be Israel included, could be Egypt included in the Eastern Mediterranean, so that we don't have this aggression, this violation of UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, for the ones that are not really familiar with UNCLOS. Anyway, and we need, of course, to have some sanctions. This is not to punish Turkey. This is not to punish Turkish people. This is just to convince President Erdogan to change his stance, and especially the blackmailing as regards the refugees, which is also unethical. This is my first comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, there are definitely voices who lean towards the sanctions, and it seems like that worked in the past and it worked on other countries. But just to clarify, do you mean general economic sanctions, because that would affect the population maybe, or are you inclined towards targeted, towards different industries or different companies that are connected to Erdogan, to the regime specifically?
There are merits in both arguments. So if we go for targeted sanctions, of course, we do not alienate the population or the biggest part of the population, which is good. On the other hand, some regimes really do not care that much about the sanctions that do not hurt very much the whole country. So we have seen that. I mean, you can have the example of North Korea, that 1/4 of the population died because of famine, but the administration of Kim family did nothing about it. They did not worry. There are some sanctions that, because the international community does not enforce as a whole, united, like the sanctions that we had in the past as regards Iran. Not the latest ones, of course. They do not work. So sometimes you need to have, very, very harsh sanctions towards everybody. This will put some pressure to a country. And Turkey, despite the fact that, it's under a dictatorship right now, I strongly believe that, it has all the democratic foundation. Turkish people, they love democracy. They are for democracy. They are pro-democracy. So I think that they can put some pressure. I mean, so yes. On the other hand, you can have targeted sanctions, but still the targeted sanctions should focus on certain industries and some persons. I don't know if this will really hurt Turkey. I'm not sure about it. It has to be very detailed. We have to go to one by one all the sanctions and see what works and what does not work.
Okay, thank you for that. While some voices are strongly leaning towards the sanctions option, there are voices like the Germans, even the Italians, who would like you said, appeasement and diplomatic talks to happen. Mr. Bozkurt, as a Turkish journalist who witnessed up close the lengths this authoritarian regime goes to persecute anyone who criticizes it, do you think that it's maybe naive to think Turkey would sit down for negotiations, or that it would stop sending warships and vessels in the East Med? And if you do think that's naive, what would be then a real incentive?
I think it would be naive to think that President Erdogan will stop bullying his neighbors just because of the economic sanction. We need to understand we are facing an authoritarian government who consolidated so much power in his own hands, practically transformed all the democratic institutions into proxies that he's gonna use for his own political purposes, or sometime for the small elite groups' business and economic interests. So you need to hit this man at the place that's gonna hurt more. So you have to go after the family members, business and the political associates that are benefiting from this regime. Not the across the board general sanction. No, I think the Turkish people, still with all this propaganda machinery, no independent critical media left, no independent judiciary, still half of the population is very much opposed to President Erdogan. We have seen that in the local election. They lost all the major cities, despite the huge resources they mobilized. It's unbelievable propaganda machinery they mobilize. It didn't work. So you need to have pinpointed, targeted sanction, not just the economic and the business sanction, but I think what Erdogan is terrified most is the legal repercussion. I'll give you an example. He sent his son to Italy to set up a house. He's gonna live there for a while with a kiss and everything. He was gonna attend to John Hopkins, school from the distance there. But when one Italian prosecutor launched a criminal investigation against the son, President Erdogan's son, on money laundering charges, because Erdogan has so much money stashed abroad in different places, some in Switzerland. The guy ran away, the son ran away from Italy. They left everything behind. And another prominent example I will give you is the Reza Zarrab case. This Iranian sanction busting guy is a gold dealer. There was a case in 2013. It was incriminated very clearly. Erdogan, his son, and other business and political associates. It's an unbelievable case involving billions of dollars from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Quds Force operation through Turkey, to Europe and other places. And the Turkish investigators, they caught Erdogan red-handed. And they launched a criminal case, but Erdogan managed to stop it until the Americans picked it up in 2016. And they put the guy in New York federal court on several charges. And eventually, a senior official of the state lender Halkbank got convicted and served time in New York. And there are more, perhaps, cases to be followed on this one. But Erdogan took this case launched by the American federal prosecutors to the heart. He put everything, all the resources, all the diplomatic muscles, all the leverage that he has, including the hostage taken, jailing American pastor who had been living in Turkey for over 20 years, dumping all kind of sham charges from espionage to terrorism to this guy. And he used it as a leverage to bargain with President Trump. Eventually, the guy got released. But Erdogan is terrified of the legal cases launched against him, whether that will be in Turkey or outside of Turkey. In Turkey, it's not possible at the moment because almost 30% of all judges and the prosecutor dismissed. Nobody left in the judiciary to take on such cases. So it's important to utilize these leverages against President Erdogan. Perhaps one last point I would raise is many people, when they look at Turkey, they don't realize the difference between the rational state actor model and the ideologically motivated, more perhaps Iranian-like non-state, non-rational actor behavior. What we see from the President Erdogan government behavior in many cases, from bullying the neighbors to sending jihadists from Libya to Azerbaijan to Syria, all these different scenarios, there is a strong political Islamist ideology play there. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense why Turkey has very much troubled relation with Egypt, with Gulf countries, with Saudis, with Europe. But when you put the ideology, this Muslim Brotherhood type, sometimes all the way circulating to the Al-Qaeda to Islamic State, this ideology is very much embedded in the mindset of the senior leadership in Turkey. When they study the profile of these people in the inner circle of President Erdogan, you will find out so many of them, they grew up in 1980s fantasizing the Iranian revolution. And just one example, Sefer Turan is a chief advisor to President Erdogan who manages the Turkish relation with the Arab world and the Muslim countries. This guy used to write in 1990s praising the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, the former Al-Qaeda, the original Al-Qaeda group. He was writing, so many articles praising how when they attack the tourists, when they attack Christians, when they attack Egyptian police officers and kill them. This guy in the Turkish media, he was writing, praiseworthy articles about them. Now this guy is in a very critical position to make a difference and in shaping the policies of Turkey with respect to Egypt, with respect to Gulf countries. So we can provide more examples of that. In a nutshell, I think we are facing a second Iran in the region. Is not necessarily related with Erdogan, by the way. I think even before Erdogan, we saw how they have been very harsh on the Christian minority groups and how they have been profiling these groups working in Turkey. So it's not, the problem is not only limited to Erdogan government. Of course, the crux of it now we see on the Erdogan's face, but I think the problem is larger than President Erdogan. There is a deeply embedded, very nationalist, very Kemalist mindset seeping through all the different institutions of Turkey. And I think the NATO dropped the ball in 2016 when they saw this false flag coup attempt. Erdogan managed to get rid of 80% of all the generals and admirals, 80% from the military force. It's the second largest army after the United States. So when all this transformation going on, I think neither the EU nor the NATO raised this issue very forcefully. Instead, they engage in appeasement policy in the name of the engagement.
That what you are saying, we have to stand up to the bully in the courtyard. Definitely, like Mr. Kyriakidis says, target the money, the financial resources, in your opinion, in a very specific way to his family and to the ones close to him, and then legally go after him legally. Now, at an international level, do we really have means to go about that? Because they're not really signatories of a lot of conventions on human rights and such. So, Mr. Van Dalen, Mr. Kyriakidis, if you want to jump in, what do we do? How do we get that leverage to stand up to Turkey?
Well, as the European Union, we have quite a lot of relationships with Turkey. As I said, you are right, the negotiation talks are now put on hold, but we still had quite a lot of money going to Turkey every year for pre-accession. I'm now trying to stop that. And of course, there is the means of sanctions. But you already indicated the European Union is not always very good in sanction, because there is a lot of division. But on Turkey, I see, especially in the last 1 or 2 years, more and more, well, let's say unanimity within the European Union to stand against Turkey very firm. As Mr. Bozkurt already mentioned, last year I had an event with this pastor, Andrew Brunson. He was in the European Parliament and he told about his story, what happened to him, how he got into jail, how he was accused by espionage, and in the end released through, I think, personal pressure put upon Erdogan by President Trump, dealing with sanctions. And I think that's the only language Mr. Erdogan understands, sanctions. And as I said, I'm really happy now that more and more European Union sees what is going on. I also had an event 2 years ago with some Orthodox priests in the eastern part of Turkey and the cloisters there, and the pressure Mr. Erdogan is putting on those cloisters. These cloisters, they already exist since the year, let's say, 390, 400 BC, Anno Domino, after Christ. So they exist for more than 1500 years. But Erdogan is forcing them to prove that they are the legal owners of all the land they have. Well, to show a document that you already possess land for more than 1,200 years is almost impossible. So they are losing lands. And this in particular was one of the cases where the whole European Union said he's going too far. So now I see step by step more willingness for sanctions, more willingness for financial pressure. And I think that's the only means to stop Erdogan.
Let me also step in. There are theoretically three kinds of answering as regards, the provocation of President Erdogan. So we can have diplomatic pressures, economic pressures, and military pressure. Now, as regards diplomatic pressure, we have seen that Arab countries really are the ones that cut diplomatic ties, or some other countries that downgraded their diplomatic ties with Ankara. So this has not been followed by European ones. We might see something like that in the future. So this is the diplomatic pressure. As regards economic pressure, I completely agree with Mr. Bozkurt. I think that I'm not, the foremost expert as regards what would really hurt President Erdogan. But I think that really the nepotism in the regime, and also, the ideology and the ones behind the ideology should be really targeted. So I think that economic pressure can really, have some very positive results, and probably imminent results, and it's good. Now, as regards military pressure does not mean, of course, that you will fight against Turkey. Nobody wants that. It's an ally country. But we're talking about, forcibly, for example, guarantee the embargo of Libya. So, and we have seen in the past some incidents, especially, within Turkish naval vessels and French naval vessels. And they were on the verge of fighting against each other, shooting to each other. We had an incident between a Greek frigate and the Turkish frigate. This is also something pretty dangerous. So what can be done? Again, I think it's a very, very good idea and proposal to have a European naval force, patrolling, just in order to be sure that the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, and especially things that are related to a possible, accident, an incident that can happen, really can happen. It can escalate from. It can cause an unintended, I would not say war, but definitely a conflict that might hurt both sides, as regards Greece and Turkey, or multiple sides, if we're talking about other countries too. So we need to put all this pressure, military pressure, but not fighting against each other, economic pressure, probably if we can have targeted sanctions, even better, and I think the diplomatic pressure as well. I think even NATO should do something about it. I mean, in NATO, I don't think that everybody is really, really happy with what is going on with Turkey. Actually, I have ties with NATO. I gave a lecture some days ago at the NATO Defense College. I can tell you that really many NATO countries and NATO officers are disagree. I want to be politically correct here. There are other words much stronger than this with Erdogan's policies. So I think that we should see that. We should see a reaction, and if the reaction is coordinated, and you have a reaction from the United Nations, from the European Union, from NATO, from the Arab countries, in the end, even Erdogan, I mean, he will have to do something about it.
Right. Yes, good point. Thank you for that. So can I maybe then propose listening to all three of you, and I would like to briefly touch on the refugee deal as well between Turkey and EU. But considering that deal, and considering the strategic importance that Turkey has, for instance, for NATO and for US, with the bases there, then what if we try to find alternatives to disentangle ourselves from being so attached to Turkey and from being held prisoners to Turkey, is looking at, you know, basing military and our bases in Cyprus or in Greece an option better than continuing in Turkey. That would probably anger Turkey at the NATO level. I understand that. But do any of you have any ideas or can go in that direction to maybe provide alternative ways where we can extract ourselves from this complicated situation where Turkey seems to have leverage over EU, over NATO, over US? What do you think? Mr. Bozkurt, do you want to give it a try?
Sure, let me jump in. Well, although it sounds plausible resolution to the current predicament that we face in Turkey, but it doesn't really solve the fundamental problem. We, at the end of the day, we still have 83 million population. It's a large country, second largest military force, and has a influence area that reach, you know, beyond Europe, beyond, you know, immediate neighboring states. So you have to, I mean, disengaging from Turkey is just for tactical purposes wouldn't really solve the problem. You need to keep engaging. You need to change the dynamics on the ground. The institution, although they sustain severe blows from the current regime, still relatively in good shape. They can be transformed. They can be reverted back to the original status. And the population is still very much opposed, at least half of them, against the current regime. Given the fact that the Turkey is very diverse demographically, and secondly, the economy and the finances cannot be controlled by the current regime because it's very much dependent on the outside factors. We have seen how the Turkish currency is tumbling down because Erdogan government cannot contain the fallout. But inside, he can control the narrative. He can control the story because he killed all the independent and critical media. So he has limited power to that extent. We can use that to turn this around. I think we need a stable, a democratic and constructive partner, Turkey. At the end of today, we cannot just shut the curtain and leave it behind, because that's not gonna solve the problem. Remember, Erdogan is very much investing this ideology not just in the Turkish diaspora, but also non-Turkish Muslim groups, all the way from Europe to America, from East Asia to even Africa. So this is a long-term project for him. Playing with on the strategic issues with the neighbors, that's the half of the story. He sees himself as a caliph. He sees himself as the leader of the entire Muslim community, all the way from New Zealand to Europe. You can see the narrative. I mean, every day he mentions about that. Just the other day, when he was speaking out in publicly, he mentioned how the Ottoman Empire dominated the entire, Mediterranean region. He sees the West as enemy. It's a black and white issue for him. But for the tactical purposes, when you push him very hard on the diplomacy, on the economy, on the military level, he may pull back, but that's only for the tactical purposes, just to buy enough time for his government so he can sustain his regime. When he feels confident enough, he's going to come back and throw a punch at you. So that's the blindness of the ideology. The interest of the Turkey is not necessarily overlapping with the interests of the current regime and the President Erdogan's own personal interest. So there's a huge distinction. I think many people, many pundits, when they look at Turkey, they try to make a reference from the Cold War era, when Turkey used to be a constructive partner of the transatlantic alliance, trying to become a partner with the EU. Is not the case anymore. Erdogan has no interest whatsoever to be part of the EU. The only benefit he gets from the investment and economy, that's the only thing that he cares. He sees as an enemy. He sees it as a Christian club. So that's the fundamental difference we see when we look at this current regime, and we have to take this into consideration and develop policies to address the real problem.
Right. Thank you for that. Now, if only we could make sure that the next elections in Turkey are free and fair, and Erdogan doesn't control the result and comes out a winner again, because like you said, it may be that less than half of the population is for him, but somehow he keeps getting a majority of votes. So that's something to work on as well, as EP, as an international community. Mr. Van Dalen, I'll let you jump in, and I would like you to maybe also refer to the refugee deal between the EU and Turkey, and if we can mediate that in any way, if Erdogan just decides to shred it.
Now, let me first come back to your question, how can we give our policies a new impetus towards Erdogan? I think the most important tool we have is the economy. And then I mean economic sanctions, turning down money from the EU to Turkey, and in the end, an economy going down, which is already happening, because I think in the end, the main change has to come from within Turkey itself. And we can help this process, I think, in particular, by making the economy getting more pressure from outside and from inside. I do not think a European naval force or military force would be very helpful, in particular because the European Union is very divided on that. So my plea would be to change this process through the economy from inside and outside. And I know that takes time. And in the meantime, people are suffering, like the very brave Mr. Bozkurt and many, many others. They still are bearing the load and the long arm of Mr. Erdogan for the moment. But in the end, the change should become from inside Turkey and with economic pressure from outside. Having said that, well, as far as the migration deal is concerned, the European Parliament was not involved in that deal. It was all a deal between some state leaders and Mr. Erdogan, because many, many refugees were coming from Syria in 2016, 2017 due to the war. What we see now is there are not many refugees any longer coming to Europe through Turkey. And the EU is financing a lot of camps in Turkey where the refugees are. On the other hand, we see more and more refugees coming from faraway countries, like Afghanistan in particular, and Somalia and African countries. So the EU is now focusing more on those countries and also trying to build a new migration and asylum policy, which is very difficult since the EU is most divided on that issue. But the money spent to the Turkish camps is one of the most worrying issues, because to control this flow of money from the EU to the camps where the refugees are is very difficult. We have a lot of uncertainty how much of this money is taken away by the Erdogan government. And I think that is very worrisome. But as such, the asylum seekers coming from Syria and out of Turkey to Europe has diminished to well, a very low percentage of people at the moment, due to the war in Syria that is more or less has come to a standstill. And the deal itself, as I said, was just a deal between some leaders. They wanted to take away the asylum pressure due to the war in Syria.
Right, thank you for that. Mr. Kyriakidis.
Okay, jumping in, of course, the composition of the refugees, if you check, the Eastern Corridor, the Central Corridor, Central Mediterranean Corridor, and the Western Corridor is quite diverse. But it is a very important issue, and we need to pay attention as what we will do with that. I don't think that Turkey really will do what has threatened Europe to do, which is, just flood it with refugees. I don't think that President Erdogan will do such a thing in the end. I think this is just a bluff. Now, as regards, you spoke about the very big base, NATO base in Interleague. There are countries that have offered to have this air base instead. Still, I mean, it's all about Turkey changing policies or not, because now Turkey has approached, Qatar and Iran. This is really very bad news for the Gulf countries. This is why the Gulf countries really do not want to talk to Turkey at all. So they have all these issues, and of course Israel is another factor. And now Israel has much better relations with all the Gulf states. We have already the normalization with 2 states, and we expect in a little while to see the same with Saudi Arabia. So President Erdogan plays the role of a big brother of the Muslim Brotherhood. He Islamizes politics, he politicizes religion, and this is the main problem. This is the main problem. But as long as we have President Erdogan, this will not change. He speaks about the Christian club. He speaks about crusades. He speaks nowadays about crusades. I mean, it's so. If this does not change, I don't know how much will be, the European Union patience really. And we have to be patient because Turkey is a very big country, is a very important country, culturally connected to the main Europe, I would say. So we need Turkey really. It's a big player. On the other hand, you cannot tolerate certain behaviors, and he's already 20 years in power. I mean, since 2002, if I'm not mistaken. So Israel already changed 100% its policies. The Gulf countries have already changed their policies. I think that European Union will do the same if President Erdogan stays in power for another 5 or 10 years. Not only President Erdogan, the Erdogan system. And I completely agree that, it's a matter of, political Islam and extremists, people that grew up with the Iranian Revolution, or people that, they had the same agreement with Erbakan in the past. These are the people that are now in power. But they are firmly in power, and this is what I'm afraid of. That we're discussing now about a country that over 60,000 people were probed in 1 year over insulting Erdogan. I mean, more than 3,500. I think almost 4,000. They are in jail for insulting Erdogan. The last thing that this happened in Turkey, I think you had less than 50 people in jail for insulting a president. I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? I have many friends that are in the military and are in self-exile right now. So we have purges in Turkey. So if Turkey does not change, how much longer can we take this behavior? This is the big question. And we should target really the extremists, the Islamists, the ones that have nothing to do with Turkey as we used to know it. The constructive Turkey, very constructive Turkey after World War II. We fought together in Korea, side by side, for example, Greeks and Turks. So I think that it's not, and Europeans in general, I think that Turkey can be a reliable ally. It can be a reliable partner of the European Union. I don't know for other reasons if it can be a full member or not in the future. But definitely, I don't think that it can, to tell you the truth. But I think that it's a power that we need to address its problems. We cannot simply disregard Turkey. And you hear that from a Greek, actually, that could be much against Turkey. Not at all. I mean, because we are the neighbors and we feel the pressure, I can tell you we want to see Turkey even better than it used to be. And under Erdogan, it's much, much worse than it used to be. So this is my point. And again, if it needs to be in the future, I think that there are other points of pressure. Taking the base of Interleague, it's easy actually. It can be done. There are countries that are very willing to host. So yes, we can check all the options, but please, what we have to do is stop appeasing Erdogan.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. Indeed, we do have. It seems that we do have methods that we can and ways that we can deal with Erdogan. Yeah, it's if any moment was right for the EU to act in solidarity and as one, I would say violating its territorial waters, its borders, would be a good moment. So I personally hope that yeah, they can reach consensus. The council is meeting this weekend. Right now here in Brussels, they are making preparations for the ministers to meet. And the Turkey problem issue will be on the agenda. So I hope consensus is reached there. I hope in the EP, Mr. Van Dalen's proposal and other people's resolutions and proposals can be voted on and can pass. And hopefully we can see a solidarity and a unified response to this. And like you said, strong. Yeah, I would like to go to our audience on Facebook. We have an interesting question. The person who asked is quoting what Turkey said in a recent press briefing. And I believe it was the spokesperson for AKP. So Turkey is a country of diplomacy if they want to solve the problem with diplomacy. But if they do not want, we will solve it on the battlefield. So inflammatory statements like these have been coming out of Turkey for a while now. So we're used to that. But the fear here is that these statements are actually meant for the Turkish people. It's a form of brainwashing. It's a form of creating false consensus. Or to just, again, paint the West as the enemy, the boogeyman, and then get the country to rally behind them. So the question that we see here on Facebook from our audience is maybe more for Mr. Bozkurt. Are the Turkish people aware of the facts, actually, of what these statements really mean, or are they really just fed, propaganda, fake news, twisted facts? I mean, there is no free press anymore in Turkey. There are 200 journalists sitting in prison with no due process, no convictions. They've just been arrested and thrown into prison. So is the Turkish audience, are the Turkish people aware of what is going on?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Practically no free, critical, or even the opposition media left after the Turkish government shut down nearly 200 media outlets, including the nation's largest circulated newspaper, very popular TV networks. All of them were killed by the government. As you said, 172 journalists as of today. They are sitting behind bars, and perhaps over 200, like myself, found themselves in different parts of the world in exile. So the people are not getting messages from the traditional mainstream media on the print and broadcast side. But Erdogan cannot fully control the internet media. Yes, there are ways and the means to make the block and slow down as such, but still, especially the younger generation, they get a lot of information from the social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and others. So we can use. We are actually in the exile using these instruments to make the message get across. But otherwise, the Turkish people, they only hear propaganda, fake news, false stories, fabrications, basically, what's happening in Turkey and outside of Turkey. Just quick note on the earlier remark, I think President Erdogan is a student of this founder of the political Islam in Turkey, Necmettin Erbakan. People used to call him before he passed away as a jihadist, as a chief jihadist guy. Why? Because during his rule as a coalition partner back in 1970s, the Turkey interfered into Cyprus and grabbed a piece of the land. I think Erdogan very much aware of that legacy, and he wants to create his own legacy itself. So when you hear the narrative, like you quoted from a viewer a while back, that from spokesperson of the ruling party, this narrative is not just for the domestic political consumption. There is actually a rationale, a reasoning behind it. Erdogan really wants to grab a piece of land that may be, islands close to Turkey, that may be parts of the Libya, in the northern part of Syria. They already, grab some lands, and they are expanding in the northern Iraq. So Erdogan, he wants to leave a legacy as a chief jihadist figure. And in terms of the refugees, he's not just going to send the refugees to Europe, but also among these refugees, jihadist figures from Al-Qaeda to ISIS, because I have been investigating this for a long time, and how the Turkish intelligence has been working with these jihadist operatives. It's not a coincidence that so many jihadists who blew themselves up in Paris, Brussels, London, Stockholm, and other places, they all spent some time in Turkey, and they get help from the Turkish intelligence. So I think the threat is not just the refugees, but also the terrorists coming from Turkey. And Erdogan has said it very plainly and publicly, before. Europeans are not gonna feel comfortable when they walk on the streets in the future. He said it, a couple of times. I think he means it, and he has the capability and capacity to make that happen.
Thank you very much for your answer. If Mr. Van Dalen or Mr. Kyriakidis want to add something, you're welcome to. I do have another question, and it's more on the defense strategy side. Mr. Kyriakidis, then, maybe you can take this question. Christian is asking on Facebook if we could potentially put more pressure, or not put more pressure, but agree amongst ourselves in Europe to stop selling arms and weapons to Turkey. He says that many EU member states, amongst them Germany, Spain, Italy, they help Turkey to establish their own high-tech defense industry. So will the other EU member states take a solidarity stance and stop selling weapons and technical skills and abilities for Turkey to develop weapons themselves? So would you like to provide more details, more clarity on this, and maybe an answer?
First of all, Turkey has a very good defense industry on itself. Definitely depends on arms imports and the technology imports. So if the European Union wants to hurt Turkey this way, it can. So, but as we very well know, it's up to individual states to do so. And frankly speaking, I don't see any Western state, including the US, so not only the European Union, willing to hurt its own industries that have a very good buyer, and this buyer is Turkey, and do not, have these exports to Turkey. So I don't think that this is likely to happen. This is not feasible. Of course, that would help very much Turkey. It would be a very good move. On the other hand, that would mean practically that Turkey would cease to be, after a while, a NATO member, because when you don't provide arms, and then the next possible, arms exporter is Russia, and the third one is China. So, do we really want a NATO country to buy arms from China or from Russia? This is a radical move. I would definitely see that this would hurt Turkey. Of course, it would hurt Turkey, but I don't think that this is really feasible.
Right. And we've seen that when NATO and some countries isolated Turkey from a specific arms deal. I think the F-35 program, then they turned around and went to Russia and purchased a very high-tech air defense system from the Russians, which as a NATO as a NATO member country, it was absolutely shocking and flabbergasting to all. So yeah, definitely that's a risk.
Actually, this is the case. I mean, the Americans would never want to have, their best equipment close to, S-400 systems. So this is always the case. You don't want Turkey to really turn to Russia or China.
Exactly. Mr. Van Dalen, closing thoughts?
Well, I think this is a very good question on these arms exports, because this is really one of the most sensitive issues in the whole European Union. The EU itself tries to coordinate more and more those weapon exports, in particular to countries that respect human rights. But you see, it does not work, because countries like Spain, like Belgium, like Germany, like France, and the Czech Republic, they have huge weapon factories and a lot of people working there, making a lot of money out of the weapons industry. And this is really one of the most, let's say, weak points of the European member states, the selling of weapons. On the one hand, of course, we say we defend human rights and we stand for European values. But on the other hand, the merchant dealing with the sales, for instance, of weapon, many times is far more stronger. And well, this is really one of the most difficult issues within the European Union. As I said, the European Commission is trying to make more a coherent policy in this field, but is failing all the time. And you do not see that only in relation to Turkey. The EU member states sell also lots of weapons, for instance, to other countries like Saudi Arabia. And on the one hand, we say, well, we should deal with human rights and religious freedom, and we should respect all sorts of rights as written down in the Human Rights UN Charter. But on the other hand, the selling goes on. Sometimes I think we see a little change in Germany in particular, that Madam Merkel wants to change these policies, but especially now in those difficult times, I think the money they gain with weapons and weapons exports, this is really one of the most, let's say, embarrassing issues within the member states of the European Union. So this is a good question, and well, we have to say to our embarrassment, the merchant is normally stronger than the pastor.
That's a good saying to sum it up. If any of you have any closing remarks, we are going a little bit over, but we still have a minute or two if Mr. Bozkurt or Mr. Kyriakidis want to add anything.
Well, let me just jump in very quickly. Erdogan has been building a military-industrial complex with his family members. His son-in-law is a manufacturer of the drone technology. All these armed drones you see from Libya, even to Azerbaijan and Armenian conflict, is manufactured by the Erdogan son-in-law and sold to the Turkish army. I think we are facing a huge proliferation issue, and Erdogan is not just building this defense military industry in Turkey, but also, spreading this to the, proxy groups or allied countries, the partners So it's going to present a significant threat at the regional wise, perhaps beyond that globally, when this keeps going. Remember, Erdogan's chief religious advisor said it very openly a couple of times. Turkey needs weapons of mass destruction. And President Erdogan himself publicly questioned the NPT treaty, which Turkey is a partner to. So they are looking to expand this military-industrial base further. I think they are preparing themselves for a reckoning day. Eventually, they think there's a huge fight coming up. So they are, arming themselves with all the, different capabilities and the capacities. If you look at how the Turkish government is seizing different industries on trumped-up charges, the arm manufacturers and the defense firms comes up on the top of the list, and he's turning them over to his cronies and the associates. So this is, I think, is a very well calculated move, and we need to be very much aware of these threats.
Thank you. Dr. Kyriakidis?
Yes, as a closing remark, just, we have to be harsh on Erdogan, not appease Erdogan. Be harsh on Erdogan. This is the only way that we can both help Turkish people and also the European Union member states in solidarity. And by the way, it is also necessary because we need to abide by our own principles and our own values. So you cannot do that by appeasing Erdogan. Please, 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 everybody must understand that we have to be harsh on him, not on Turkish people, harsh on Erdogan.
Thank you for that. Well then, it seems that is the message of today's webinar, that the EU leaders, the US president, the NATO have to come together and decide to stand up to the bully in the courtyard, in this case, Mr. Erdogan and his regime, while protecting the Turkish people, respecting the sovereignty of Turkey as a country. But yes, we do need to be more decisive in our actions. And when I say we, I mean the leadership of the EU. Thank you very much to each one of you for participating in this lively discussion. The topic is still current. The conflict just erupted in Azerbaijan, Armenia, buffer territory there, and Turkey is involved in that too. So I have a feeling that we're going to come back and discuss more about Turkey and its provocations, unless something miraculous happens and we decide to impose economic sanctions, to show up strongly, military, and so on and so forth. But the conversation is not over, and more than that, Mr. Van Dalen and Mr. Kyriakidis at his level and Mr. Bozkurt in the media, each one of you are taking concrete actions to actually make this to put feet to these ideas, I should say. So thank you very much for your involvement, for your work on this. We wish you success. We pray for your safety. Mr. Bozkurt, please be careful and watch your back. Obviously, you have a target on your back. So yes, all of you stay safe. And yes, thank you again to everyone, and we will see you again soon.
We may not impress everyone. Some may even see us as insignificant, but the truth is, we are not here for power. We are here to make a difference. And that's often in the little things. Small focus shifts, amendments that matter. Like I said, we are not here for power or might. We are here to empower, faith, peace, love, life. We are here to give a voice to justice, to freedom, families, communities. We are here to stand up for what is right. In a time when people more and more distrust political institutions and their intentions, we believe that trust can be rebuilt. But not by a European Union that promises to be the solution for everything. We stand for an EU that facilitates, that finds solutions for key matters, and holds back where that's more appropriate. A European Union that acknowledges that that union was once built on a firm foundation of Christian principles and of Christian values, where people from minorities have the fundamental freedom to be different from the majority, respected and protected. We believe in an economy that works for people and the planet, because we aim to build a future that is full of hope, where people are empowered by initiative and ownership, where human dignity is not seen as optional, but inviolable, where healthy families are recognized as the basis for thriving societies. As different as we are, we know one thing: that we will always find each other in the same God, in the same faith. We are not here for power. We are here to be the voice of what is right. We are ECPM, the European Christian Political Movement.